All right, it's the week 2 recap in Great American Conflicts. What we've got going down so far, where we last left off, is we're adding territory. And Henry Clay came up with the Missouri Compromise, where slave states could exist below Missouri. Slavery was forbidden north of the southern border of the state of Missouri. Last time we added territory in the Northwest Ordinance, slaves were forbidden. Now that the Louisiana Purchase was made, slavery is open down here. And that worked okay for the time being, but another ingredient will be thrown into the mix of what started the Civil War. Beginning in the 1820s and 30s, the Abolition Movement began to catch on and gain national attention. We have Angelina and Sarah Grimke, two daughters of a South Carolina slave owner that came to Philadelphia to preach about the ills of slavery. It wasn't just, passengers or friends of Southerners, but actually firsthand accounts of slave owners. Added to that is men like William Lloyd Garrison, who began to publish abolitionist newspapers like The Liberator. One of his employees will be Frederick Douglass, an escaped slave who literally taught himself how to read, was an extremely articulate writer and public speaker. He's even better than the Grimke sisters because he himself was an actual escaped slave. David Walker, friend of William Lloyd Garrison, a free black man, writes an appeal to the colored citizens of the world, asking not only for the freedom of slaves, but equality for women and Native Americans in society as well. And all of this begins to drive a wedge between the North and the South. The North, like Adam Smith said, was becoming more industrial, while the South was staying with what had always worked for them before. Southerners are saying, if you don't like what we're doing, then just leave us alone. Added to this mix is Harriet Tubman, who I call the OG, helping to form and perfect the Underground Railroad, helping slaves escape from the Deep South, north across Lake Erie into Canada. And the symbols that the Underground Railroad used were simple things like which light was on in the window. Could meant safety or keep on going. A pair of pants on the clothesline meant keep running. The gate open to a fence meant it was okay to stay. Everything was hidden in plain sight, so slave catchers would not realize that anything was amiss. And that abolition is vaulted to a higher level when Harriet Beecher Stowe writes her great American novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And when evil Simon Legree beats Uncle Tom, who dies in his young master's arms, abolition goes and slavery goes from a political and an economic argument into something that is now deeply emotional. The world resonated with that story. It was fiction, it was made up, but Harriet Beecher Stowe never said that. So now Northerners who didn't care now are angry at slavery. And this ends up with the war with Mexico. It comes back to the Missouri Compromise. When the United States goes to war with Mexico, when the Mexican War is won, the United States annexes not only Texas, but the states of New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and California. At this point, the country had always been able to balance free state to slave state. And now with this new territory, one group or the other is going to get an enormous advantage in Congress. Henry Clay comes up with another compromise called the Compromise of 1850 that says Texas is slave, San Francisco will be free, and we will let the other states vote on whether or not they want to be free and slave. This increases the tension that will end with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. One other thing we discussed was the economic argument in states' rights, where President Andrew Jackson fought a duel with his Vice President John C. Calhoun over high import tariffs on European goods. In 1832, the Southerners thought about seceding for the very first time over economic issues. You take all of these ingredients and you throw them in a pot. Sooner or later, it's going to boil over, and we will see that next week with John Brown's raid, the assault on Lawrence, Kansas, and we will start the Civil War. That's week 2 wrap-up.